Welcome once again to the Golden Rule. I'm Barry Schroeder, and the purpose of this program is to introduce people to things of God, whatever form they might take. And this is a special program, something that's coming to Detroit Lakes, which I just want to make sure that everybody knows about. It's a very unusual event in that it's a full feature Hollywood type production coming to Detroit Lakes on an exclusive premiere showing. It's going to be on January 25th. It's a Thursday night at 6 p.m. at the local theater. And it's entitled Parish of the Pines, based on a book that was written by that same title, featuring a man named Frank Higgins, who became concerned for the plight of the loggers in northern Minnesota, the plight especially concerning their spiritual well-being and the fact that they had no access to the gospel of any kind. And so he single-handedly, without credentials of any kind, took on a parish that was comprised of 30,000 loggers in northern Minnesota. The lead actor's name is Russell Stendhal Jr., named after his father, Russell Stendhal Sr., who some of you who've watched this program before know that his dad was on the program here. But Russell Jr. is not only featured as the lead actor in the movie, but he's going to personally be here to meet and greet any of the people that want to come. The movie itself is going to be free. The admission will be no charge. There'll be a donation opportunity given for people that attend, but they just want to get the word out. This movie is very interesting in that it shows right from here, from Minnesota, what life was like back in the late 1800s. And so people who are history buffs, who like Minnesota history, will be especially appreciative of this movie and the opportunity to see it, as well as people involved in logging of any kind in this area. And actually, because when these guys were doing logging, the trees were this size, they were virgin trees at that time, and in order to find that type of tree for the filming of the movie, they had to take the entire film crew up into various places of northern Canada and Alaska. So it's an interesting film. We have the privilege of having access to the trailer for the movie, and I'd like to show that to you right now.
They say it's hopeless.
Hopeless?
No, there's no less than 30,000 of us lumberjacks out here in these woods.
How many men did you say work in the woods?
30,000, I'm told.
And they never hear the gospel?
No, sir. Not ever. How can they?
Well, they're going to, brother. Even if I have to tell every one of them myself.
I must say, you don't look much like a preacher.
Well, that's because I ain't one yet. This is my first assignment. With full endorsement of the church, I don't see how this is an impossible task.
Do you suggest we shoulder aside our flock for men of the will, women, and whiskey?
Ever had any preachers up this way?
Preachers are after steak. They ain't care about us poor devils.
Well, here's one who isn't after the Satan, whose interest is in the lumberjack.
Where's that preacher? I'd like to meet him. Such a preacher must be of some unknown variety.
You're that pot-hunting preacher that threw me out of the bunkhouse last night.
I am. What do you have to say about it? Now, you pea soup eaters will do one of two things. You'll either listen to the gospel or take a thrashing.
Give him a thrashing and the preaching.
You, Mr. Higgins, are merely a student candidate for ordination, not an ordained minister. What makes you hopeful of success in this matter when others since have failed?
The lumberjack is a man of large heart and little will. God brought me all this way to find you.
I would like you to meet Frank Higgins.
Frank Higgins? The Frank Higgins? I was just reading an article about you in the New York Times. The Reverend Francis E. Higgins,
I'm not really a reverend, you see that?
known all through the lumber regions of the North as the lumberjack clergyman.
They shouldn't be using the term clergyman.
He has taken the gospel to more than 30,000 of the roughest men in the world.
It only proves that the man who wants a larger parish, he has only to remove the fence that surrounds his present one.
In these pineries, I feel as if I were a boy again. Back in the good old days.
Do you think one day I'll be a real preacher?
I reckon you will be, if you're not concerned about what people think, but what God thinks. I reckon you'll make the best preacher anyone ever heard tell of.
Well, that should give you an idea what the movie is like and hopefully whet your appetite for it. I just want to read to you another synopsis of the movie. It says, in a time of raid and plunder, exploitation and despair, one man became the detonator for the reformation of the entire region. Determined and with no small amount of courage, with the largest heart and perseverance beyond compare, he would bring a piercing ray of hope into the dark world of the neglected sons of the Minnesota lumber camps, and change their lives forever. This is a true story of Frank Higgins and the birth of the largest parish known to man, the Parish of the Pines. And at that time it included 30,000 loggers throughout northern Minnesota. But I want to share with you a little bit about the Stendal family. You've heard Russell. For those of you who didn't hear Russell Stendal, we're talking third generation now. Third generation Stendal family that's making this movie. The movie was produced by Russell's children, his daughter Lisa and Alethea. They're the directors, producers, and promoters. And their brother Russell is a lead actor. But Russell himself played a significant part as a 4-year-old boy. Let me just read this to you. Oh, by the way, if you haven't read this book, you would enjoy very much reading the story of Russell Stendal, who spent 142 days as a prisoner tied up in a jungle in Colombia. They're holding him for ransom. Can you imagine, holding a missionary for ransom. They mistagged him for sure, but it's an exciting story. He wrote the book while he was a prisoner. I can't go into the details, but here's how it got started. I was 4 years old. Our life was very comfortable. This is written in 1959. We had a new home, 2 cars. My father made very good money. He'd just been offered a promotion to be one of the principal engineers building a $30 million lock and dam complex on the Mississippi River at St. Anthony Falls. One evening, after my father came home from work, he sat down in the living room with me on his lap and started showing me a colorful picture book about Indians in South America. Dad thought he would broaden my horizons a little and show me how people lived in foreign countries. The picture book, however, turned out to be a little more candid than my dad realized. It showed the Indians working and producing handcrafted articles to sell in town on market day. They were selling their handmade artifacts and receiving the money. On the next page, it showed the Indian men drinking up the money and the women and children waiting outside. The men got into a drunken argument which led to a bloody machete fight. The last scene showed an Indian woman patiently trying to help her drunken husband home so he could sober up and start the same cycle all over again. And this is 4-year-old Russell talking. I was shocked. In all my sheltered existence, I had never even dreamed that people could live like this. The fact that the setting for all this was the beautiful Andes Mountains made it all the more shocking. I turned to my father and I asked, why did they live like this? Dad replied, well, Russ, I guess it's because they don't know any better. I became very indignant and I said, well, why don't they know any better? Dad said, I guess it's because no one has ever taught them or shown them a better way. I became more indignant, and so I asked, well, why hasn't anyone gone over there to help him? Dad said, well, I guess it's because no one really cares about these Indians, Russell. I looked at my dad and I said, well, you care, don't you, Dad? Why don't we go? Dad started to get a little uncomfortable. Well, Russ, a person can't just take off for a foreign country. Why, that would be missionary work. God would have to call you. God would have to provide the finances and prepare the way. Maybe when you grow up, Russell, you can be a missionary. Dad looked pleased with himself and thought he had slipped nicely off the hook by putting all the responsibility on God. He didn't notice that I wasn't listening anymore and that I'd slipped off his lap. I was kneeling by the side of the couch praying out loud. I prayed, dear God, please call my parents to be missionaries so I won't have to wait until I grow up. Dad looked a little thoughtful the rest of the evening. 4 years later, after God had done many other things for us, we were on our way to Colombia as a family. So that's how Russell Stendhal's life as a missionary began. He was an 8-year-old kid by the time they actually got to Colombia, and grew up there, became a pilot, flew an airplane. That's what the picture of the airplane is about, because he got kidnapped by these guerrilla forces on one of his trips into the jungle. And as I said, they held him for 142 days. And during that time, he had an opportunity to see what needy people really were like, living right in the midst of them. He didn't know whether he was going to live or die. He could have been killed at any point in that period of time. So anyway, Russell did get released, and he went on to do a lot of missionary work in Colombia. And now he's got a family. He's got children. And his daughter, Lisa, got it in her heart that she wanted to be a filmmaker. And so he sent her to Hollywood to take professional training in filmmaking. And so she completed that course. And now this is the second movie that she's produced. The first is entitled La Montaña, which is a story of how Russell worked with the guerrilla forces, the government forces, and another group in Colombia, bringing peace, trying to bring peace among them. So anyway, that's the story. Lisa got a hold of this book, Parish of the Pines, and she decided this would make a good movie. We're from Minnesota. They live in Grand Rapids. They have a home, summer home in Grand Rapids. And so that's how the movie came about. So I thought you might find that interesting as you go to watch the film. And please feel free to encourage other people to join you. This is going to be a tremendous thing for our community. You know, I just want to say thank you to the movie theater, to the local theater, and to Odyssey Theaters, of whom they're a part, for bringing films into our community that are God-exalting, God-honoring, that promote things of God, because it's so important. You've probably noticed in our day that God isn't high on a lot of people's agendas, but that is changing. And it's going to change radically as the return of Jesus Christ gets closer and closer and closer, because that's what's happening. Would you believe it's a lot bit closer now than it was 2,000 years ago? Oh yeah, it's 2,000 years closer than it was then. But it's closer and closer. Every 24-hour period, it gets closer. Jesus Christ is coming back. He returned in an amazing way, standing on a mountaintop. All of a sudden, as he's speaking to a bunch of people, he, for lack of a better word, levitates. That's not what happened, but he rose into the sky, disappeared in the clouds, and then the angels came and said to the crowd, "What are you standing here gazing up at the heaven for? This same Jesus whom you've seen ascend into heaven shall come back in like manner as you've seen him go." So we look forward to that event with great anticipation. I hope you're anticipating it. In fact, you better be ready, because when he comes back, it's game over. You have a chance now to give your life to Christ, but once he returns, it's going to be like when the door shut on Noah's Ark. There was no getting on the boat after that. So thank you very much for listening. It's good talking to you again today, and we'll see you next week.